Welcome back, everyone. Today, things in fact get more interesting than we really bargained for. So, you know the way that people have been complaining about the treatment of night elves in World of Warcraft for years now. They're one of WoW's most unique, beloved races, and they've continually been given the short straw. We've had major characters sidelined or used as punchlines for other characters' development. They've been hit with senseless tragedy, one after the other. There are broken and battered people who have been frozen in time at their lowest point, in spite of being the goddamn cover image for World of Warcraft. They're also the second most played race in Europe and North America, behind the Night Elves, making them the most popular alliance race in the game. They're also maybe the most important race in the game from a narrative perspective, with their ties to the planet Andaloon. So, I think we all hoped that the Heritage Quest would finally put some of that respect in. But it didn't. The Heritage Quest itself wasn't bad, but it does highlight a problem that plagues WoW to its very heart. One that will slowly drive a huge portion, and has been driving a huge portion, of the lore-focused players away. Yet somehow, it also has the exact energy, the exact type of content that could literally save WoW from the malaise that hangs over it from Dragonflight. Okay, that seems crazy, so let me explain. The quest opens with you being summoned to Warden Arco-Narin Starshade, it's quite a long name, in Stormwind. All players will of course recognize her actually as a night elf that you rescue from Jadenar in Felwood all the way back in Classic, but you will not recognize her brother, Lysander, because he was only a baby back then. In the time since her escape, she has become a warden, and her brother grew up as a mage. This quest has all the markings of a developer's love and care put in, because you get to chat with these characters about things. Nari's carrying the sword of her human paladin mate, Trey, who was tortured and killed in that quest chain back in Classic. Lysander is talking about being born after the battle for Hyjal, meaning he's 19 years old at most, and he's part of a new generation that's never experienced immortality or any of those old night elf things. So you're tasked to meet Maiev in Felwood to investigate Jadenar. There's been a resurgence in demonic corruption, and Tyrande has not heard back from the detachment that she sent to sort it out. You find Maiev mourning, a dead priestess of the moon, learning that her mission was to purify the Moonwell and to begin to reclaim the land. And a cute touch actually, if you die in the zone during this quest, the priestess is actually there as a spirit healer. And of course, the idea of Felwood being restored for night elves, that is the sort of thing we want to see. The dialogue and the voice work here is solid. Maiev's famous growl and rough attitude kinda carries. You see, Lysander is a mage, and as the leader of the Watchers, one who has spent her days since the Sundering hunting demons, Maiev has absolutely zero trust in him. She'd probably kill him if he wasn't Nari's brother. A little known fact about Maiev from the Wolfheart novel is useful here. She hates mages. She actually hates them so much she secretly assassinated a ton of allied highborn mages and even plotted to kill Malfurion for all of his failures as leader. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that about her. Now, this manifests as her being snarky. Lysander makes observations about magic and fel in the area, and she just bullies him for saying it's obvious. She refuses to use his name. Meanwhile, he goes on to call her Maiev, but he catches himself and says Warden, like his sister. Now you start to make your way into Jadenar proper, learning on the way that a lot of the satyr you're killing are actually corrupted sentinels, and it's thanks to Lysander's knowledge of the fel and arcane that you can free their spirits from corruption. And over the course of a slow RP walk, under Maiev's protection, which was a crazy buggy and frustratingly slow experience on launch day, they keep chatting. It turns out this place, whatever it was called before Jadenar, was where their mother, a druid, slept. And that's another bit of lore that's easy to forget. After the Sundering, when Nordrassil was blessed by the aspects, Ysera's part came with a price. Malfurion and the new druids would have to help Ysera care for and protect the dream, which meant that they were called to sleep for vast swaths of time spent in service apart from family and loved ones. And as you get further in, Arcanaren reveals the truth to her brother, that this is where, yes, she was captured and held by the demons back in Classic, and that is why she's been acting weird. Maiev tells Nari of her own capture at Illidan's hands, but that the freedom that comes after is hers alone, and ultimately she chose to join the Wardens, and that was a blessing. Lysander asks Maiev if she has any siblings, and she brings up Jared and his various heroic deeds. Cute bonding moment because she's clearly not used to somebody knowing of Jared or showing interest in her, and after that she calls Lysander by name. Moving on, the actual questing here is simple. Kill a load of demons and cultists, which includes some pretty new additions like corrupted Mag'har orcs, which tells a tiny story of what influence demons can still have in the world. The other part is to protect Lysander while he closes portals deep within the Barrow Dens. He has tons of voiced dialogue during this. He's seen grief despite his youth, and he even says you, the Night Elf player, has seen your share. He talks about Nari's capture and how it changed her, which leads into a musing on his people. Nari thinks their mourning defines them and tries to bury it under stoicism and duty as a warden. Lysander's face, though, is literally scarred with burns from Teldrassil, but he says he's not broken. None of them are. He even addresses you directly. He says the Night Elves need each other more than ever, and that you see that, and that's why you answered the summonings and took this quest upon yourself. And so, with the portals closed, it's now time to take on their leader, Lord Helnerath, a Dreadlord and the rival of the original Dreadlord who used to be in this area in Classic, Lord Banehollow, who actually recently showed up in the Warlock quest, which is rather suspicious. Maiev, of course, seethes in her classic rage, promising his end. The key, of course, though, is Lysander, who can stop the summoning Helnerath is about to finish. Nari mentions how brave her brother has been, and that she need not worry, which is a reversal of before, when she hid that, right? This was her prison. She didn't want him to worry about her, sort of showing that really her overprotection was a mistake, and was in fact a projection of her own fear. Arcanaren's line for the last quest is cheesy as hell, but it does go hard. It is time to put our demons to rest. I mean, that is, like, you're literally killing a demon. That is levels of cringe that meet I am my scars. And in a way, it also kind of rocks. It's that classic Blizzard cheese that, you know, if somebody overheard it, you might be a bit embarrassed, but also you're like, yeah, it's kind of cool though, isn't it? He sort of is his scars. Now, that's the kind of stuff that, honestly, yeah, WoW needs. Anyway, the fight is, of course, boring because it's modern WoW and those fights are never interesting. But hey, at least the idea of protecting Lysander while he does his thing is thematic as hell, and if this were a proper scenario instead of a non-instance quest, it could have been a really darn cool moment in gameplay. The sort of thing that maybe would be a solo duty that would slap really hard in that other game that I won't mention. Once you're done, we are treated to what may be the coolest in-game cinematic we've had in WoW in a while, even if, yes, admittedly, it's not the highest quality. Maiev creates an opening for Lysander, who blasts Helnerath, affording Maiev the chance to pop her Avatar of Vengeance and kill the Dreadlord, complete with a fade to black VFX, some real nice sound effects, and the classic It's Over camera shot. Helnerath's ritual causes the whole place to collapse, so Lysander opens a portal, everyone escapes, himself diving out at the last second. It's a little bit goofy because it's all happening in the WoW engine, but hey, it's got that cool factor, and that's the kind of thing we want. And this is where I want to take a moment to say that this is the energy that WoW needs. It genuinely brings up some memories of Warlords of Draenor and Legion, where the game was a bit rough around the edges, but also was more willing to have fun with it. If we got shots like this all the time, moments of squeaky survival, of characters popping cooldowns and murdering enemies, it would be a lot more satisfying and a lot more visceral than the experience we got. Made me happy to see that. Imagine the Tyrande Sylvanas cinematic from the Shadowlands, but it doesn't immediately blue balls you by slamming the handbrake and drifting from a long-awaited showdown between two highly motivated characters into a self-indulgent lecture about how bad violence is. in World of Warcraft. Imagine if Thrall had stopped Grom from killing Manaroth and told him that peace cannot be won with war. You're like, oh, it's a fucking demon, kill it. Anyway, protecting Lysander and this cutscene are the exact sort of groundwork that WoW should have been laying for a long time to make the questing feel cool again. So overall, that's a big win, and there's narrative criticism, but the fact that they can do this sort of thing is a good sign. Outside then, the Moonwell is purified, and this may well be hinting at a future where the elves actually reclaim lost parts of Hyjal. That, to me, would make me excited about the prospect of an Azeroth revamp expansion. I don't think it'll happen in 2024, but hey, 2026 will do. Time marches onwards. Anyhow, after that we get to the sappy conclusion. The face markings traditionally reserved for the female-only Watchers is given to Lysander, who turns down the pain-numbing bruiseweed, only to be told the moral of the story, that he proves nothing in choosing to dwell in pain when the world offers ways to move past the pain. Completing the cycle of names, he calls her Warden, but then she corrects him, saying it's Maiev. When you get back, Maiev thanks you and hands you the beautiful armor and the glaives. The glaives the Night Elves have wanted for 19 years and grants you the title of Amishan, which means something along the lines of honor of the goddess. Tyrande sends you a cute letter in the post thanking you for your aid, celebrating your new title, and saying that she will personally invite Lysander to join the Sentinels. It's all very literal. It's time for the changing of the Kaldorei tradition. Not just like letting a man bear the marking of a protector and becoming a sentinel, but to accept mages into society more, showing that sort of thing in the game narrative, and also to accept that they need to move on through the pain instead of just wallowing in it. And sometimes this is where things can fall apart a little bit, because there's basically zero indication that they've been wallowing in pain at all. Plus, their mother being a druid is kind of a retcon of early druids only being males. Night Elf mages have widely been accepted since the Chandra-Lar rejoining in the Cataclysm, and those face markings have been on player character males and NPCs like Malfurion for years, and male sentinels were already a thing as of Battle for Azeroth. So, like, society, just forget that, okay? Also, Satyr have almost always been male Night Elves who turned willingly. Why were all of these Satyr actually female sentinels who are forcibly corrupted? We're chopping some things, we're changing some things. One of the things that people liked about the Night Elves is their, highly sort of divided society with those more strict roles, where, the women were the kind of badass sentinels, killing shit, also doing Priestess of the Moon shit, while, the men were kind of doing all the druidism, and that made them feel different to other societal setups. And, that's the way that it was. Now, the dangerous precedent for WoW's story kind of rears its ugly head here. This is all emotionally sound. It's the story of this young, new mage showing the Night Elves a bright future. Very satisfying in paper, especially when his sister's stoicism is shown as pure cope for trauma. But once you examine it, I think some unfortunate truths come to the surface here. This is exactly the sort of thinking that's been pissing people off about WoW's story really since Legion ended. So let me ask this. Why did those things need to change? What was wrong with the Night Elves? Because there's this inherent implication that there was something very wrong with them, and that somehow them opening up their minds, changing everything, improves things. When it comes to wallowing in pain, that absolutely can be true, but the Night Elf people, through Tyrande's story in Shadowlands, got past this, I thought. WoW's had this insane focus on change recently, on dismantling the things that were, and I think people kind of feel that deeply, because slowly, Azeroth is having its edges sanded off, right? And I think it's this pretty toxic approach to handling a world and an IP that says, what was there before wasn't good, so it needs to change. And it has this very unfortunate homogenizing effect where, frankly, all of the different groups in World of Warcraft are feeling just more like humans. And, we're in a fantasy world. Why does everyone got to feel like humans? Humans are the boring race. It's kind of like, yeah, sorry, did you really love the Night Elves as you saw them in Warcraft 3? All that content you played, content in vanilla? Well, you know what? Too bad, actually. They were actually poor traumatized victims, and all that isolationism and feral adherence to nature, that was pure cope. And instead, they should have basically just acted like those good, nice, kind humans like that Anduin Rin, who's a good boy, whose hair is so very blonde and perfect, and just act like every other group in the game. It's kind of devoid of tooth and claw, and I think it kind of pisses over the actual race's story and their history. It just very quickly takes them from where they've been in the game to clearly Blizzard just being like, yeah, make them humans like Anduin. And, there was good things. It had a Maya action scene, but the rest was kind of her just giving in to some kid who thinks he knows better than she does. And is that really how you treat a legendary hero in the Warcraft franchise? I'm not saying Maiev should be flawless. In fact, if Illidan is his scars, then she is her flaws. And that's actually perfectly okay. And a character being able to move past their flaws, yes, that's good. That can happen. But it's going too far, too fast. It needs more time to cook, right? This is a story that shouldn't happen in a 20-minute quest. And it therefore comes off as having very little respect for the Maiev that people loved in Warcraft 3 and later in the Burning Crusade. Night Elves have nothing to apologize for. They have no weaknesses to overcome from perhaps their own perspective because they're proud enough people, and both times they had major failings with, the Empire causing the War of the Ancients and Illidan's illicit Well of Eternity. They rose to the occasion and they did what they had to do. In fact, their crazy closeness to nature and their reverence for Elune is where their identity and their strength came from. So, making a super big deal about accepting a mage and dismantling the sort of way their society is stratified, that comes across as change for the sake of change. And sure, you can read this as them letting go of their traumas and moving on, but that treats their history as PTSD to overcome rather than the choices that made them who they are. Even if it's actually executed fine, I think the ideas behind this story are a direct antithesis of what people actually want and expect for the Night Elves. So I would say enough of the therapy. Honestly, we need a little bit of action. We don't need an 18-year-old prodigy showing up with a better understanding of the Fel than the 10,000-plus-year-old warden making zero mistakes, proving everyone wrong and saving the day, because this just reeks of insecurity. The insecurity of staff inheriting the franchise, now stuck with a bunch of fantasy races that they don't particularly like the way that they are. This change it attitude is what led to Shadowlands feeling the way that it did, and it kind of hurts me to say that, because this quest has got attention to detail from Classic, and the Night Elves is clearly a labor of love, except for some strange narrative insecurities. It's just completely thematically misplaced. This is the attitude, whether intentional or not, that leaves people with a Netflix Witch or a Cowboy Bebop, I suppose, instead of a Netflix One Piece, with a Shadowlands instead of a Legion. It's also, unfortunately, quite boring. A quick escort quest into a Barrow Den, and then a fight that's over in a few seconds. Come on. That other MMO does story duties that have people clenching all over the place. Here's an alternative. It's the same thing, but instead of Lysander being this perfect zoomer, he actually makes mistakes. He's new, so he gets enraptured by the raw, corruptive power of the Fel because of something Halnarath does, even though he's very well-meaning. Perhaps being young, he lacks the wisdom that Maiev and the rest have, because while Maiev is a traumatized, damaged person from the crazy time she has had on Azeroth, she's also very experienced and very wise. And she's not generically wise, she's, in her own little domain. But that should still shine through. And perhaps through the guidance of some of these older characters, he is able to pass his test, pass his rookie mission, break the temptation, break free. I suppose you could do some sort of appeal to Elune to intervene or something, which would be a bit cliche, and I don't think we should really do that. But something that actually has him grow more in terms of struggles that he must overcome, instead of just continually being right about everything and saying, hey, we've got to heal, man. It just feels boring. And perhaps for the other characters, maybe Maiev is a bit touchy, right? A bit worried about this whole magic thing, because magic has some real historical baggage for their civilization, you know? They could have used this to more genuinely bridge the gap between the generations, instead of it feeling like the new replacing the obsolete, you know? Last year's model, built for a different task, no longer particularly needed. And a change to this that would respect their history more, treat these things with reverence, but still allow those characters to grow and to, yes, start to slowly push up against the barriers of what has defined their civilization. You can do all of these things, but you need to give them time, and you need to do them deftly. Not just, bam, good zoomer boy, there you go, done. Because ultimately, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and what has happened when Night Elf fans have seen this piece of content? They've not been happy. It's the heritage quest. It should be, you know, celebrating the heritage of their people. Instead, it's a preachy lecture about trauma from a kid instead of a celebration of what it means to be a hero of the Night Elves. It was also limited in scope. Just talking about some elves, because 10.2's PTR story actually does a great job of introducing Night Elves traumatized by Teldrassil and seeing the various different ways that their people cope, for better and for worse. It handles this stuff vastly better than this quest. The Druids of the Flame, and 10.2 being a dream patch, is the love the Night Elves needed, and it leaves the heritage quest in an awkward place where it accomplished basically nothing except finally giving us some banging armor and the glaives. But I suppose the Moonwell's happenings pave the way for the reclamation of their forests. With that being said, though, my final point, I really hope the interviews are wrong or are teasing or are misinterpreted regarding Malfurion. Because just like how Legion managed to involve Tyrande, Malfurion, and Illidan, yet not even have those characters talk with each other, the idea that we finally go to the Emerald Dream, and Malfurion, one of the characters the most associated with it, is not involved, is preposterous. The developers may say, yes, well, you know, he's got to hold down the fort in Ardenweald. No one gives a fuck about Ardenweald. Ardenweald is wrapped up in the worst expansion you ever did, and storylines that were absolute wet squibs. And it's even funny. Shadowlands was a stupidly preachy expansion at times, with just forced characters that were so poorly written, like Pelagos, who, funny enough, voices Lysander. Because again, Pelagos, that story could have been great. You know, where he started, where he ended, both good. How you got there, where was the meat? I don't know what's up with all this constant therapy talk, a lack of action, the amount of tell don't show. There's bits of this quest that actually do show don't tell, you know, finally, right? And that's what I talk about. That's cool, in this video. But this still shows that they are very inconsistent with their narrative, because on the other hand, you look at the Forsaken. Ha! Death to the living. The Forsaken questline, it's fucking awesome. They are the Forsaken, right? They're, using the way that they can breathe underwater, leaping out of the water, killing motherfuckers. Absolute brutality, and it's great. It's just what the Forsaken should be. Why did they get to be the Forsaken, but the Night Elves don't get to be Night Elves? It's just like how Bane Bloodoof has turned into a bovine Anduin. Come on. Have some actual diversity in your characters, please. All this stuff feels the goddamn same. And with that, I'll see you next time.